What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and today we are once again taking a look at some of those OCG reveals from a recent OCG live stream, and we have a ton of cards to cover. This card right here is the first of its kind. It is the first Cyberse Pendulum monster, which is pretty interesting. We also have a new generic fairy support card, which is pretty cool. And finally, we have a handful of new Gusto cards, which once again here, just like with Chronomalies, I was pretty surprised to see that Konami was giving Gustos more support, but I know that they were doing pretty well in the structure deck poll, so I'm not sure if this is why they're getting more support, or maybe it's another reason. Who really knows? I do want to mention before we jump into the discussion of today's video that my good friend Nim just launched Optimal Wave 4. That is his merch site, and he has this new mat. He sent me one and it's really cool. He's done one other mat in the past that I've shown off on the channel. They always have great designs, and he has a bunch of t-shirts as well. I will put a link in the description below to his shop, and I believe this mat is only for sale through Thursday. It is on pre-sale right now, so if you want to get one of those or check out his t-shirts and stuff like that, make sure to click the link in the description below. Anyway, let's take a look at this first card. Antagonistic Intelligence is a level 8 light Cyberse Pendulum effect monster with 2500 attack and 3000 defense. The Pendulum effect is very simple. Any non-monster card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. That is basically the exact opposite of Dimensional Fissure, and that effect is pretty interesting actually. I'm not sure where this card will see play in terms of pendulum decks, but I think that effect in the future might just be good enough on its own to be a decent floodgate card against the right type of strategies. If you were playing against a Sky Striker deck, for example, that would be a pretty annoying effect to play against. Now obviously Sky Strikers are not currently in the meta at all, but what I'm trying to say here is that in the past we have had good decks that have mostly played spells and traps, not so much monster cards, which is great for this card because it means if we ever have another deck like that in the format as a top tier strategy, this card could be a great floodgate. Let's take a look at the monster effect though, and the first monster effect is a hard once per turn. You can reveal this card in your hand, add one other pendulum monster from your hand or one card from your pendulum zone to the extra deck face up, and if you do, special summon this card. If another monster or monsters is normal or special summoned while this card is in the monster zone, activate this effect, send that monster or monsters to the graveyard during the end phase of this turn. That last ability doesn't matter that much, and honestly the special summon effect, while cool, probably doesn't matter that much. It's worth mentioning, even though I probably won't cover them on the channel, that this live stream also had other generic pendulum support. So pendulums seem to be getting more attention from Konami. They are really struggling in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! They have been for a while, but maybe with more cards like this and those other cards, we could see pendulum decks topping once again. Then we have Protector Spirit, a level 7 light fairy monster. This card says if a fairy monster you control activates its effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can target one face-up card your opponent controls and one face-up attack position monster you control, banish the first target, the opponent's card, and if you do, change the second target to defense position, which is your card. If this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one monster on the field. It cannot be destroyed by battle during this turn. And the first and second effect on this card are hard once per turns, but you are allowed to use each of them in the same turn. I think the main idea here is that you just splash this into any random fairy deck, and then when you activate your fairy monster effect, you can special summon this card from your hand and then target an opponent's card and this card to turn this card to defense and banish that opponent's card. That is a pretty good line of play there. You could also target another face-up attack position monster that you might have, which is especially good if you plan on using that monster for a link summon or synchro summon or or Xyz summon or whatever. So I think that this card is kind of like a Dino Wrestler Pankratops for any fairy deck, which is pretty neat. We don't really see a lot of generic type support in modern Yu-Gi-Oh anymore, so this card being so generically good for pretty much any fairy deck is very interesting, and I think a lot of players are going to want to try this card out. If you are playing fairy monsters, it seems like this is almost an automatic inclusion in your deck. Maybe not the main deck because it's not as good going first, but definitely in the side deck if you want to try to break your opponent's board while doing things you already would be doing, like activating fairy monster effects. The final effect here doesn't matter as much, but hey, it's a bonus on an already great monster. Finally, we have some new Gusto support. What a random archetype to give support to, but like I said, I think it is because it was doing pretty well in the structure deck pull from a while back. So this first card is a level 6 Wind Psychic Synchro that takes 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner Gusto monsters. You can only special summon this card once per turn, so you can't like spam this card over and over again, which makes sense because the effect is pretty darn crazy. If this card is synchro summoned, you can activate this effect. You cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except wind monsters. Also special summon 2 Gusto monsters, 1 each from your hand and deck, but their effects are negated, and if you do, immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon 1 Gusto synchro monster using only those 2 monsters. And finally, your opponent cannot target other Gusto synchro monsters you control with card effects. Right away, if you can summon this thing, you immediately get another synchro monster, and that is really great in a Gusto strategy. They have never been a truly competitive deck, but they do have a fair amount of good cards, including some great synchro monsters. So I like this card a lot, and I can see why they restricted people to only special summoning 1 of these per turn, because that effect is pretty impactful. This card does restrict you to only special summoning wind monsters after you use that effect, but I don't think that matters that much. Obviously, all of the Gusto synchros you want to make are going to be wind monsters, and you have other good wind monsters you can end on as well, like Appaloosa, for example. Not to mention, you are allowed to special summon non-wind monsters before you use this effect. Obviously, a card like Helki Firebrax would be very good in a Gusto deck, so that is pretty cool that you can summon non-wind monsters before you use this effect, which does open up a lot of combos. This card is great, but there are 2 more cards we have to take a look at. For example, we have this new tuner monster. It is a level 3 Winged Beast tuner effect monster that says if a face-up Gusto monster or monsters is destroyed by battle or sent to your graveyard and this card is in your hand, you can special summon this card. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send 1 Gusto monster from your deck to the graveyard, then you can special summon 1 Gusto monster from your hand. Not only does that load up your graveyard for the Gusto that shuffles back 2 Gustos into your deck and then draws you a card, but also it puts another monster on the board. So this card sets up your graveyard, it puts another monster on the board for synchro summoning or link summoning, and that is a pretty big benefit, and this card is going to be played in probably every single Gusto deck. Finally, we have a new equip spell, Gusto Tailwind. Let's take a look at what it does. Equip only to a Gusto monster. The equipped monster cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. That's pretty cool. During your main phase, you can activate 1 of these effects based on the equipped monster's level or rank. 4 or lower, special summon 1 Gusto monster with a different type from your deck. 5 or higher, special summon 1 level 1 tuner from your deck. That's basically like a Helki Firebrax effect on any Gusto monster that you equip this to. That's pretty good. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then discard 1 wind monster, add 1 Gusto spell or trap from your deck to your hand. This card just does so much. I mean, it puts more monsters on the board, and it even has a graveyard effect, which is great because oftentimes you will probably be synchro summoning using the monster that you equipped this to. I love Gusto Tailwind. All three of these cards really do seem very viable, and I hope that Konami will give them even more support because, let's be honest, they probably need more than 3 cards, even if those cards are good. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. That live stream from a few days ago was crazy. Konami revealed so many new cards. It was really awesome, and I was really glad to be able to cover a lot of them on the channel. I'll see you guys later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.